I can't get enough of you. Subscribe, like, and share. Even though she was prepared for this, it was impossible not to feel afraid. The elevator ride to the 30th floor, with no one else in it, felt suffocating. I need to say it. I have to tell him. So-eun mustered the courage to speak up. Director, I want to ask you something. Could you turn off the lights? She didn't want her surgery scar to ruin the excitement of her first experience. Tae-joon's eyes widened. Though he didn't overtly show his surprise, his expression was clearly puzzled. He didn't actually intend to force her into anything. He just wanted to have her at his place. He planned to feed her delicious food, watch a movie, and maybe take a walk holding her hand if she wanted. Is this enough? Hey, of course it is. Don't worry about it. Although I think we are forgetting a very important thing. Can I add it? No. Didn't you see what you caused earlier? Are you going to take responsibility if she runs away again? All right, stop nagging me already. He was careful not to be too blatant about his desires, fearing she might run away. Director, I want to ask you something. If she adamantly refused, he was ready to just hold her and sleep. I would like you to turn off the lights tonight. But he hadn't expected her to be so proactive. After a moment of silence, Tae-joon, staring blankly at So-eun, responded. All right, I'll just leave a bedside lamp on. No, not even that. So-eun raised her voice, now sounding urgent. Seeing her adamant reaction, Tae-joon was amused. You prefer not to see anything? Should I blindfold you? No, it's not like that. Just no lights. How will I see you then? You won't be able to see me either. Pushing her blatantly, So-eun's face turned red. The sight of her face, ready to burst, egged Tae-joon on. It would be a torture not to see such an adorable face. What if someone kidnapped you and replaced you with someone else and I couldn't tell? That's not going to happen. You've watched too many movies. I have my limits too, Tae-joon playfully replied. Her request was somewhat odd and surprising, but her seriousness made her seem endearing, and Tae-joon couldn't help but laugh. He wanted to give her whatever she asked for. All right, is there anything else you want? After a brief pause, So-eun answered. Oh, yes, to be honest. I've never done this before. I mean, I don't have any experience. Hearing this, he stiffened a bit. He couldn't discern her intentions behind saying that. Tae-joon asked again. So, please take care of me. It was hard to believe that someone as greedy as Yang Hee-wook wouldn't have touched her. How could a guy like that not lay a hand on her? It's okay to be honest. I won't hold it against you. Though unspoken, these thoughts swirled in his mind. But he swallowed his words, not wanting to reveal his jealousy. In response to So-eun's request, Tae-joon changed the subject instead of answering directly. I promise I won't turn on any lights as you asked, but can you at least let me see you? Consider my situation. I might not see anything. His voice lowered in a warning tone, making So-eun's eyes quiver slightly. He decided to grant her request and nothing else, wanting to devour her wavering gaze. Concealing his subtle impatience, he prompted her for an answer. Answer me. All right, fine. As soon as she answered, his large hands engulfed her from behind, one hand wrapping around her waist, the other cradling her neck and jaw. Though there was enough space, his strength made her feel like she was trapped in a bronze statue. Lowered his lips to hers, touching them lingeringly once, twice, she quivered, then surrendered. He caught his breath as her supple, womanly warmth sank against his much harder frame, a tentative, evocative caress. She made no effort to deny him. He claimed his due, his lips firming, then hardening on hers. She met him, not proactive, but ready to follow his lead, her reactions a mirror reflecting his desire, her giving a reflection of his need. Inch by unconscious inch, her hands stole upward. She angled her head, inviting him to deepen the kiss. His lips brushed her forehead and cheek before trailing along her earlobe. Ah! A soft gasp escaped her lips, and So-eun quickly covered her mouth. She sank into his embrace, and he tightened his arms and his hold on her. Her perfume sank into his brain. All he asked for, she gave, not just willingly, but with an open-hearted generosity that was an invitation to plunder. So he plundered, but with no sense of seizing anything that wasn't freely given. If he wanted, she gave, readily, easily, as if she delighted in the giving, which only made him want more. "Wait a moment. Let's go to the bedroom." "We're going," he whispered, his voice filling her ear. Her breath came out in short gasps as he pulled her jaw towards him for a kiss. His lips remained on hers, commanding her senses while he sought wilder pleasures. When he closed his hand about her breast, he wondered if he'd gone too far. The shock that lanced through her was very real. He instinctively soothed, distracting her with his lips, his tongue, with increasingly explicit kisses, but he didn't remove his hand. Moments later, she drew in a shaky chest. Beneath his hand, her breast swelled, against his palm. Only then did he caress the soft flesh, feeling it heat and firm. She was wearing nothing more than 2 layers of fine silk. The temptation to do away with them, to lower his head and set his mouth to her sweet flesh, grew with every second. She murmured incoherently when he drew his lips from hers, nudging her head back so he could trace the line of her throat, remembering just in time not to mark her. The sweet flesh filling his hand beckoned. He lowered his head and heard her stifled cry. He was driving too fast, pushing her relentlessly along a path she'd never trod. So he slowed, introducing her to each sensation, letting her assimilate the glory of each before moving on to the next. He paused, deliberately easing back from their kiss, giving her a chance to stop him if she would. She was fascinating, a woman of endless temptation. He basked in her warmth, feasted on her bounty, secure in the knowledge that she would eventually be his. She might be wondrously responsive, gloriously giving, but now would be too fast, too far. Kneeling down, Tae-joon held her ankle, gently removing her shoes. She was sensually naive, definitely untutored, even if she could not be precisely innocent. Having known only a man who had clearly failed to appreciate her, that was obviously the case. She was following his lead blind. He knew it. He, however, knew precisely what they were about, knew very well how the timing went, how the play should pan out. And even though he'd restructured the script and advanced her lessons to the point where her ultimate surrender was imminent, that time was not yet. Thus spake the coldly calculating mind of a highly experienced rake. His body, unfortunately, was far from cold and didn't want to listen. Most of his mind was similarly enthralled with the wonder in his arms. He knew precisely when she realized she was alone with him in a very dark bedchamber with a very large bed a mere foot away. Her spine straightened, her chin tilted higher, a fine tension gripped her. He drew her against him. After only the slightest resistance, she permitted it, settling breast to chest, hip to hip, thigh to thigh, as if she belonged there. Then he bent his head and set his lips to the lips that were waiting for him. Waiting, yearning, ready to pay his price. He knew she had no idea how precious, how heady. He found her lack of guile, her open generosity, the way she yielded her mouth at his demand, the way she sank against him, into him, the way she gave without restraint. There was power in her giving. As before, it caught him, captured him, and held him in thrall. He had to have more, no more, of her. He sensed the hitch in her breathing. Closing his fist in her hair, he drew her head back, exposing the column of her throat. Blind in the dense darkness, he slid his lips from hers to trace the supple line and find the spot where her pulse beat hotly. Straightening, dragging in a swift breath, he caught her lips again. She kissed him back, avidly, greedily, as ravenous as he. He lifted his head and found her lips again, swollen and hot and needy. She drew him in, tongue tangling with his, boldly inciting. He slid his hands down to her hips, then further, tracing the smooth lines of her flanks. She crushed against his chest. Her hips tilted into his. He wasn't even thinking when he grasped the folds of her clothes in both hands and pushed them from her hips. His senses had seized. She was like hot, supple silk, alive, enchanted, all his. Her limbs shifted sensuously against him, not to push him away, but to enclose him more sweetly. He couldn't catch his breath, mentally or physically. Lust closed like a fist about his gut and shut off his brain. Gripping her hips, he caught her lips and plunged into her heat. She screamed. He gasped, grimly fighting for control. It couldn't be, yet it was. Had been. The shock shook at least a few of his wits into place. After a fraught second in which he teetered on the brink of madness, he managed to ask, "How?" "I." Her voice quavered. She was, it seemed, as shocked as he, if not for the same reason. That he could understand. If this was her first time. "Sure," gently. It took all his effort and the last shreds of his will to force himself to ask, "Do you want me to stop?" With what little wit he still possessed, he fought to ignore the warmth of the lush body in his arms. He was so aware of her breathing. He knew when she reached her decision. She shook her head. "No." Thank God. The lights had gone out. The darkness was intense. He couldn't see her, only feel her, hear her, sense her. And she couldn't see him, what? "Just trust me." She gasped as he rose over her again, her hands clutching wildly as, palms flat on either side of her, he braced his arms and held himself above her. He'd purposely darkened the room to ease her fear of revealing herself, her identity, to him. In doing so, he'd unwittingly created a sensual situation beyond even his ken. Making love in total darkness emphasized the tactile sensations and amplified the soft, intensely sensual sounds. It was a new and very different experience. He was aware of every square inch where they touched. He heard every little hitch in her breathing, every soft sound she made. He was attuned to every moan, every gasp, incoherent entreaty. It was her and her alone scent that wreathed his brain. In his arms, in the dark, she became the epitome of woman. She was the essence of joy and the essence of madness. She was the ultimate challenge. His senses were full of her, focused most completely on where they joined. The heightened sensations left him reeling. He demanded and she gave, not just generously, but with a wild abandon that shattered his control. He couldn't get enough of her. He drank greedily, yet her well was never dry. She gave him joy and delight and pleasure unimaginable, and in the giving received the same. When the end finally came and their ride ended in soul-shattering glory, he was, for the first time in his life, utterly beyond this world. One thought drifted past. He'd been the first to have her. A second later, that deeply buried part of him he rarely let loose growled a correction. The only one to have her. Tae-joon, lying next to her, couldn't sleep for a long time even after she fell asleep. If only I had returned a year earlier. Yang Hee-wook must have had an unexpectedly saintly side. Now, he just regretted how long it took to reclaim her. "You are mine," Tae-joon whispered softly as if knocking on her dream, then closed his eyes. At 6 a.m., So-eun woke up alone. Tae-joon wasn't in the bedroom. Through the slightly ajar door, she heard the clinking sounds and saw light streaming in. He wakes up early, she thought. She realized that Tae-joon was indeed an early riser, as evident from the previous week and now today. Despite still feeling fatigued, she thought it inappropriate to lounge around in someone else's house. Aya, however, attempting to sit up made her groan and flop back down. Her body felt heavy and unresponsive. He was too much. The previous night, Tae-joon's actions were nothing short of teasing torment. True to his initial promise, he kept the lights off, but everything else went his way. His relentless yet tender approach to her exhaustion was almost terrifying in its persistence. As soon as she broke free from his embrace, she hastily put on her clothes, but he pulled her back without hesitation. In that moment, she made the mistake of saying, "Turn off the light," instead of, "I'm done." This inadvertently agreed to his advances. The urgency to keep the lights off led to her slip of the tongue, causing her to fall asleep only after midnight. It was a time filled with happiness, overwhelming emotions, and rapid breaths, a night so vivid that thinking about it now almost brought her to tears. Even as she drifted off to sleep, there was a slight tension, expecting he might pounce again. She pretended to sleep until she genuinely dozed off. Amidst those trembling dreams, she recalled hearing his voice. "You left. You were mine." Those were the words from last night, uttered when she was drifting in and out of sleep. It wasn't a dream. He had indeed whispered that. It was a strange thing to say, not directed at her. With her eyes closed, she couldn't discern his state when he said it, whether it was a somniloquy or a phone conversation. What does that mean? Who were you thinking of? Curiosity mingled with a desire to remain ignorant. Their relationship had escalated rapidly, with So-eun confessing her feelings first and him bulldozing his way into her life. As quick as it had been, they knew little about each other. They lived only in the present, as So-eun had hidden the scars on her abdomen for a flawless first night. Tae-joon too must have concealed his past to hold her. It was possible he was trying to fill a void left by a former lover. "I won't say anything. We're together for the sake of our desires." Entering the living room, So-eun saw Tae-joon greeting her from the kitchen. "Did you get some sleep?" Tae-joon approached her. His silhouette, blurry without her lenses, became clearer as he neared, triggering vivid memories of the previous night. "Yes." "Did you get some rest?" I can't bring myself to look into his eyes." A man of a larger frame compared to hers, everything about him was huge. He wrapped his long arms around her neck, making her feel both comfortable and uneasy. Recalling being under his weight made her shiver again. "How do you feel?" "I enjoyed it. What about you, So-eun?" The casual way he used her name surprised her more than the compliment. Amidst all the thoughts racing through her mind, her name, spoken by him, sounded so warm and loving, as if she were someone precious and dear. So-eun tried to keep her voice steady. "Me too. You cried, though." "How did you know?" she wondered, surprised. Had he seen her? She flinched when he explained with a smile. "You can tell by touch." She felt a bit embarrassed. She rarely cried and had never shown her tears to anyone. Yet, over something trivial as an adult, she had cried. "I didn't realize that. I didn't hate the sensation, I was just..." Feeling embarrassed, she turned her head and noticed the moon jar, which had been in 2 pieces, now restored on the shelf. "Director, that jar. It's glued together." I glued it back together. I used glue." Upon closer inspection, the cracks were visible. Though the jar could still serve as a decoration, it could no longer function as a vase since it couldn't hold water. Feeling proud of his work, Tae-joon boasted. "Looks flawless, right?" "No, it's a bit obvious. You can see the cracks." She responded honestly. Just as hiding her past with Yang Hee-wook and him possibly reminiscing about a past lover were evident in their demeanor. How long could they continue deceiving each other? "I'm sorry." Here we go again. "From now on, every time you say sorry, I'll flick your forehead." Tae-joon playfully threatened, miming a flick to her forehead. Instinctively, So-eun raised her hand to her forehead. Her habit of instinctively flinching was evident, making Tae-joon's expression momentarily harden. "I'm just kidding. Just stop apologizing, So-eun." Feeling awkward, she rubbed her forehead. I don't understand." "Well, then, I'll say thank you instead of sorry." "What?" "I broke something worth 50 million won. This is a big deal. But thank you for acting like it's no big deal. It's never coming back." "Who says that?" As he hugged So-eun, Tae-joon said, "You came back to me. Maybe this is a warning to hold on to you so you don't leave again, or it means we shouldn't break like the moon jar." As he hugged So-eun again, his phone on the table rang. Thinking it was an incorrectly set alarm, he ignored it. But he saw it was a call from his aunt, Seok-hwa, who was on a business trip in Europe. "Answer it." Wondering what urgent matter this could be, he answered. "Yes, Auntie." Tae-joon, you're awake. Yes, Aunt, you're on a business trip, right? How's your condition? Nothing to worry about. Actually, I called to ask for a favor. Yes, go ahead. Can you go on a business trip to the Philippines this weekend? What should I do? I can listen to the whole call. This weekend? Tae-joon asked, turning to look at So-eun. Yes, this weekend. It's Friday there, right? I think it'll be a good idea to leave right away. There was an accident involving the employees at the Philippine electronics factory. It wasn't a workplace accident, but happened during a carpool after work due to the driver's negligence. Hearing about the accident involving the company employees gave Tae-joon a prickling sensation in his chest. The bereaved families are demanding compensation, blaming the company. But we can't take responsibility for accidents outside work hours. You'll need to discuss this with the local legal team and handle the situation respectfully. Though he understood the situation, Tae-joon decided to draw a line. Aunt, I'm an executive at K Electronic Services. Shouldn't this be handled by the electronic side? One of the deceased was from the services sector, so you can handle it. He glanced at So-eun again, pretending to be uninterested. He remembered her sad expression when Yang Hee-wook went on a business trip. You speak good English, and it's a chance for external activity. I can't go. I have plans. Despite Seokwa's attempts to persuade him, Tae-joon firmly declined. His plans with So-eun came first. But Tae-joon, if it's not an important appointment, it is important. Even if the president died, I wouldn't go. Sorry, Aunt, but find someone else. I can't do it. Deciding there was no need to continue, he quickly ended the call. So-eun, curious, asked him, was your aunt asking you to go on a business trip this weekend? When Tae-joon didn't respond, she quickly continued, Go ahead, Mr. Director. Tae-joon looked at her. Her expression showed no hint of disappointment, which felt unfair to him. You don't have to stay because of me. Business trips can happen anytime, and we can meet whenever. He couldn't help but feel a tinge of sadness. But knowing he turned down his aunt's request for her sake was enough for So-eun. She was genuinely grateful for his consideration. Don't you want to spend time with me, So-eun? I do, but I think it's better if people don't know I'm with you. It's better for both of us. This was how she could reciprocate. I've ridden in your car more than 10 times, and once, my colleague knew. My neighbor, Bo-bae, often asks what you're like and if I talk to you a lot. But no one suspects our relationship. So-eun spoke clearly. As she continued, Tae-joon's expression turned pale and dry. She felt a distance between them. People know we won't end up together. I like how things are now. She was content with the present moment. I know we won't last, so it's okay. I won't harbor false hopes. I'll just appreciate your presence. An uncomplicated relationship without any demands, that's what she wanted. After she finished, Tae-joon approached her. She couldn't tell which part of her speech triggered him. Tae-joon picked her up. So-eun clung to his neck. Han So-eun, don't you enjoy being with me? Eh? No, that's not what I was trying to say. Wait, Director, this is too much. Before she knew it, they were in the bedroom. He gently laid her down and lowered his head, his lips almost touching hers. I'll turn off the lights. Even with the lights off, it's too bright. As she anxiously cried out, Tae-joon pressed a button beside the bed. The lights went out and blackout blinds covered the windows, turning morning into night. Better? He asked, knowing she couldn't say no. Eno, wait, what are you going to do about your business trip?